All right, so today we're going to talk about retained earnings. What is retained earnings? So in accounting or any finance classes, they're probably talking about retained earnings and you're wondering what you're talking about. Okay, so retained earnings in simplest terms is the amount of money you still have. Okay, so think of retained earnings, the money you still have. So this is the money you still have in your company. So whatever business that you do, after you pay expenses, after you pay people, how much money is still there? That's retained, keeping, earnings, money, keeping the money. Okay? So how do you figure out retained earnings in these math problems in your accounting classes? Simple equation. Let's consider you actually had net income. Okay, so this one is the net income scenario. And we're going to abbreviate net income in I. Okay. You also paid out some dividends. Okay, so you had a little money, the company did pretty good last period, and you paid out some dividends. We're going to call that DIV. We're trying to figure out retained earnings. We're going to be using retained earnings from the last period, and that could be last quarter, last month, last year, either way. So we're going to call last period. This one's going to be RE sub 0. Okay? We're trying to get to this period's retained earnings. So we're going to write retained earnings again. Retained earnings, write it down. So that's how much money I had. We're trying to see how much money do I have. We're going to call that RE. So here's a simple equation. Retained earnings from last period. Add in the money you made. So net income is when you sell stuff, that's your revenue. When you buy stuff and your expenses, that's your expenses. Revenue minus expenses is net income. It's our hope that the revenue we're bringing in is more than the expenses we paid out, and that's how we get net income. Okay. Then you want to subtract whoever you're paying. So you're paying out your shareholders and you're paying out your owners. You're going to go ahead and call that the dividends that you're paying out. When you do that simple math equation, simple addition and subtraction, you're going to get the retained earnings from this period. Simple steps. So let's say last period we had retained earnings of $1,000. That's how much money we had left over in our little business. $1,000. We made some money. Let's say we had a really good month last month. We had a really good month last month, and we made $5,000. So we adding, because this is the net income. After we paid expenses, this is how much money we made. And we said we'll be nice to our shareholders and we'll pay them $2,000. Okay? 1,000 plus 5,000. We're at 6,000. But then we got to take out what we were nice enough to pay our shareholders. We're going to take out 6,000. Minus that 2,000, and we're left with $4,000. So retained earnings for this period is $4,000. So what if we had a net loss? So let's change net income. This is the net loss scenario. Everything else gonna be the same. We're gonna call net loss NL. Not really much is gonna change. Instead of getting some money. So in other words, we sold some things, we made a little money, but it wasn't enough to cover our expenses. So we spent more than we made, ended up in a loss. Okay. So what if we had a net loss? What if last month, the retained earnings were $3,000? That's from last month. This month, we had a loss. We didn't do too well. We started spending some money we didn't really have. We didn't bring in what we thought we were going to bring in. So we had a net loss. We lost $500. Now in accounting, we do want to show our losses with those parentheses. Shows that's a loss. So we still had a little money from last period. We're still going to pay our shareholders. Let's go ahead and pay them $500. Okay. So now we're not adding a net loss. Theoretically we are. We're going to take that out. So retained earnings from last period minus the loss minus what we paid in dividends will equal our retained earnings. Again, this is the net loss scenario. Net loss. 3,000 minus 500 minus another 500. Retained earnings is $2,000.